The moment you walk into the International African American Museum in Charleston, you will know that this is going to be unlike anything you've ever seen before. Museum Director Dr. Tanya Matthews takes us through exhibits that will leave visitors with a mix of emotions, as personal experiences will color the way each individual sees the exhibits.
Where you are right now is the Gullah Geechee Gallery. Now, I would argue that every American history museum ought to have a little bit of Gullah. But here, of course, in Charleston, in the heart of the Low Country, we are still arguably the hub of this culture and this community. And so it allows us to create essentially a living history gallery and tell the story about the incredible influence of this particular community of African Americans that's still here and thriving, that really was able to hold on to our West African roots and has infused through everything that we now refer to as Southern culture.
You don't have to go into the museum to learn about some of the darkest moments of history in South Carolina. Even the land it sits on holds historical significance. The building stands 13 feet over Gadsden's Wharf, the port of arrival for almost half of all enslaved Africans brought to America.
The historic record tells us that in the early 1800s, a particularly cold winter came through, and there were upwards of 700 souls being held simply waiting for their price to go up, and they died waiting. Our storage house was one of those spaces where individuals were kept and perished waiting for their price to go up. But the way we decided to interpret that space is there's a one-dimensional brick outline that shows you where the storage house was. And then cutting across that brick outline, you've got two black granite walls. The interior polished so smoothly, you can see your reflection in the walls. There's a series of hunched kneeling figures within those two walls, obviously representing those that we lost. But as those figures get closer and closer to the water, they appear to be emerging out of the concrete. And then on the outside of that space, we've inscribed the Maya Angelou poem, "And Still I Rise." So it's always all woven in there together, never just one emotion when it comes to our stories.
The museum began as a vision in former Charleston Mayor Joe Riley's State of the City address 23 years ago.
It took us a long time to get here. The vision and the themes that you see now is not actually how we started out. That started out because we had conversation after conversation and talked to community after community, and that's how the picture got bigger and bigger and bigger. And we still, of course, can't tell it all. You cannot fit an entire culture inside any history museum, even if you are the second largest of your kind in the country. So we have a gallery, South Carolina Connections. Mm-hmm. You know, the International African American Museum is a national African American history museum with an international lean, but we understand who the home team is. Mm-hmm. And the more I read, the more I learn, the more I also realize that many of the stories that I know have roots right here in South Carolina. Oh, yeah. We, of course, have modern living history and Congressman Jim Clyburn, though some folks forget just how much history he made at the beginning of his term, so we put him in there. But then we have Althea Gibson, we have Dizzy Gillespie, we have Ronald McNair. These are stories that people know, names they're familiar with, but may not quite understand that their roots are here in South Carolina. We step into the Carolina Gold Gallery, which is the gallery where we do go into the institution of slavery. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we wanted to really do is we did want to be authentic and talk about the true dehumanization of the institution of slavery without losing sight of the humanity of those who were enslaved.
Dr. Tanya Matthews is the CEO and director of the International African American Museum. This Carolina Gold Gallery is a hands-on history lesson and an eye-opener to anyone who didn't understand the value of the enslaved was greater than labor and more than money.
We do have some weighty things. You know, we have receipts. You know, because people were being bought and sold. We typically talk about slavery and enslavement through the story of cotton, which is a very important story. And for folks who are doing their global studies, they may learn a little bit about sugar. But I think our conversation about rice is just yet another way of telling that story. And because through the period of slavery and the importation of enslaved people who really knew how to cultivate rice, Charleston became ultimately the richest city in the colonies.
The gold crop was rice, and in this exhibit you can see for yourself that it wasn't easy to harvest.
So here, do I hold it here?
You lift it up.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And so, what this is a mock-up of the large scale, essentially mortar and pestle.
Oh, okay.
That was used to shell the rice.
Wow.
Right? And we had this setup so people would get a sense of that. So one, you'd be doing this for hours.
And it is very heavy.
It is very
Yes.
heavy. And if you look at the pictures that we
wow.
have, you would lift it over your head and down again and again and again and again, right? And this is even a little bit lighter than it would be in real life because we want folks to get some sense of heft, but
Right.
we don't want it to be impossible.
Right.
This gallery offers the visitor an opportunity to stand in the place and embody an experience dating back hundreds of years of people who helped to build America.
Behind us on this side, we talk about individuals. We pulled out just 2 or 3 actual stories of actual people who lived during this time to help folks kind of narrow down from that big picture. As much as we haven't told these stories, there was always an effort to capture them and preserve them. Around the 1940s, we had the Federal Writers Project, and oral historians were sent into the Deep South to record the stories of folks who had been formerly enslaved. So the records are there, the notes are there, the audio is there. So when you come to the museum, we introduce you to a couple of these stories. And because this was a federal project, we actually have the ability to use their own voices and their own words inside the exhibitions. And so that has been, I think, really moving for a lot of folks, but also very connecting to be able to actually hear voices telling their own stories.
Even as visitors take time to experience and learn what it was like to be enslaved in South Carolina, there are galleries within the museum where the walls speak.
What you are looking at here is the port of arrival. So our 2 smallest galleries are the port of departure and the port of arrival. Very, very simple galleries. Black walls with names on them. This port of arrival has the names of enslaved peoples. Here we have our own records, and we have the records of many of the plantations here in the Low Country. And so we selected some names and put them on this wall. These are obviously American given names, not the names that folks came over here with, because sometimes it's hard to make 12 million people into a person. This modern idea we have around saying people's names is one of the themes that we took into the museum. We broke ground in late 2019, right? And then of course the world turned upside down. But I might say that because we really started our origin stories back as far as 2000, I think we were prepared for that. We've always been in this for the long haul. And so we completed construction just earlier this year. We're still installing our special exhibition. One of the amazing things about our design is that we did incorporate a space to be changing out regular exhibitions. We have the African Ancestors Memorial Garden is the way we reference the outside. And it's a garden within a garden. So there are art installations. There's an ethnobotanical garden in the space. There is a large-scale infinity reflection pool that has an art exhibition on the bottom of it. So there are many things to experience. We are not a fenced-in property, and because we do want to welcome folks to wander into the space.